Typically, ordering fractions means to take a set of fractions and organize them according to value, either in an ascending or a descending manner. If we were to order the following fractions on the number line, it would look like this. So if we had to order 1/2, 1/3, and 1/6, we could partition our number line into the unit fractions. And we would see that 1/6 ends up here, 1/3 ends up here, and 1/2 ends up here. Placing a set of fractions on the number line can help us understand the value or size of each fraction. From this information, we can determine the order of a set of fractions. Based upon the position of these unit fractions, 1/6, 1/3, and 1/2, the ascending order, or the order from least to greatest, of the fractions would be 1/6, 1/3, and 1/2. The descending or greatest to least order of the fractions would be 1/2, 1/3, and 1/6. Caution, you need to be careful that you don't misuse your understanding of whole numbers to order fractions. Remember, fractions are equal parts of a whole. For the fractions 1/2, 1/3, and 1/6, identifying 1/6 as the largest fraction because its denominator, which happens to be a 6, is larger than the other denominators of 2 and 3, is actually an incorrect thinking. In fact, remember that the denominator describes how we have partitioned or separated out the whole. The equal pieces of an object which has been partitioned into sixths will be much smaller than the partitions of halves or even thirds of that same object. Notice that I have bolded the word same. Here is another caution. When we are ordering and comparing fractions, it is important to pay attention to whether or not the overall wholes that are being compared are the same. Here's some examples. These overall wholes are the same, and so it is correct to say that if we take the overall whole and divide it into 6 equal pieces, 1/6 is going to be much smaller or less than 1/3 of that same whole. However, if the overall wholes are not the same, then we have to use caution when we compare. It would not be okay in this example right here to say that the 1/6 is smaller than the 1/3. In fact, because the overall whole is much larger here, 1/6 becomes larger or greater than the 1/3. So again, when comparing and ordering fractions, be sure that the overall wholes are equal. So once we have determined that the wholes are the same, how do we order fractions like 2/3, 4/8, and 1/6? Well, I like to use 3 different number lines because there are 3 different fractions in this case. The first thing I have to do when I use 3 different number lines is make sure that each of the number lines are equal in size because that's my whole, and my overall whole needs to be equal. Then I use the unit fraction to partition the number line. So for 2/3, because my denominator is 3, I needed to partition into 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. The same for 8ths and 6ths. I needed a number line to be partitioned into 8ths and into 6ths. Now I can find 2/3, 4/8, and 1/6. And I can go ahead and order them. I can see that in ascending order, 1/6 is first, 4/8 is second, and 2/3 is last. Or in descending order, 2/3 would come first, 4/8 second, and 1/6 would be last. It is possible to use one number line when comparing and ordering fractions. I don't like to do that because of how messy the number line can become. Here's an example. See how those unit fractions ended up lining up so close to each other and in some cases on top of each other? It makes it a little difficult for me to read. It's not wrong to do it with one number line. It's just not how I prefer it. When comparing fractions, I first look for clues. The first clue is the unit fraction. When I see that the numerators of the fractions to be compared are ones, I will ask myself, do I want to share with, and then I say the denominator's number, or do I want to share with, and I say the other denominator's number? Let's try it out. Each one of these unit fractions that are being compared is definitely a unit fraction. It has a 1 in the numerator, so I can use the unit fraction clue. Do I want to share my candy bar with 2, or do I want to share with 6? Well, I would rather share with 2 because I get more candy bar, so 1/2 is actually greater. Same thing, do I want to share my candy bar with 9, or do I want to share my candy bar with 3? Well, I would rather share my candy bar with 3 because I get more candy bar, so 1/3 is greater. Do I want to share my candy bar with 4, or do I want to share my candy bar with 5? Again, I want to share with 4 because I get more candy bar, so 1/4 is greater. That's just a little clue I look for when I have to compare and order fractions. If there are unit fractions where 1 is in the numerator, I ask myself, do I want to share with, or do I want to share with? The second clue I look for is a common or same denominator. When I see two denominators that are the same, I ask myself, do I want to, and I say the numerator's number, or do I want, and I say the numerator's number, the other numerator's number? Let's try it out. I see that for each of these fractions being compared, there is a common denominator. It is the same. So I say, do I want 1 out of 8 pieces, or do I want 4 out of 8 pieces of my candy bar? Well, I want more candy bar, so I'm going to eat 4 out of 8 pieces. Do I want 5 out of 9 pieces of my candy bar, or 2 out of 9 pieces? I want 5. It's more candy bar, so it is greater. Do I want 3 out of 6 pieces of my candy bar, or 1 out of 6 pieces? Well, again, I want 3. It's greater. But sometimes the unit fraction clue and the common denominator clue don't apply. So then I have to use my knowledge of unit fractions on a number line. Once we've created a number line, we can use it to compare the size or value of fractions. Let's use the previous 3 number lines from earlier in our lesson. Here, I might be asked to compare 2/3 to 7/8. Well, I can see that I don't have a unit fraction of 1 in the numerator, so I can't use that clue of do I want to share with, or do I want to share with. I can also see that my denominators are not common. They're not the same. So I can't ask myself, do I want this many pieces, or do I want this many pieces? So now I have to use the number line. For 2/3, I divide my number line into my 3 sections, and I find 2/3. For 7/8, I divide my number line into its 8 sections, and I find 7/8. And now I can see that 2/3 is less than 7/8. Sometimes, though, I can actually just use number sense to compare fractions. I might be asked to compare 1/8 to 5/6. As long as the overall wholes are the same, I can think to myself, if I need to divide a whole into 8 pieces and the exact same whole into 6 pieces, 8 pieces are definitely going to be smaller than 6 pieces. And if I'm only going to have one of those 8 pieces, that is a lot less than 5 of those 6 pieces, because 5 is almost all 6 pieces, and 1 is hardly any of the 8 pieces. So in this case, I could compare and say 1/8 is definitely smaller than 5/6. These are just a few ways that we can practice ordering and comparing fractions. Thanks for watching.